So the stock round has ended, and we're going to move into the operating round. And the big exciting thing is, the guy who probably most wants to reduce the train rate, the guy who had the biggest question with the Moscow and Kursk, sitting in Moscow, chose to start the only company that got floated straight up. And he started it over here at Kazan. It has to start in an unconnected city, and there aren't a lot of those. Right now we had this, and the one chosen. He doesn't think he's slitting his own wrists. He waited a little bit, bought some GR, and said, hey, I still have enough cash that I think I can start a company at a very high rate. And he started it at 180 bucks a share. Cost him 360 bucks. That's not enough to buy one of them trains up there without taking out loans or something like that. So he's probably got something up his sleeve. No big shock. I mean, he's probably looking at buying this train with enough cash. The Moscow Kursk can buy a big train. And then looking at the long run, being able to convert this thing either into the Russian National or running it on the smaller train and putting 80% or whatever into the Treasury. Either way, looking at trying to make the best off of it to help his other rail. Maybe be kind of risky, we'll see. For most of the others, they bought their own railways. Grand Russian clearly looks like a big winner for a while with 3 trains sitting on it, and the owner not holding another corporation or company or anything. So a lot of people bought shares of that who could, the investor classes. But the other players largely looked at trying to get enough capital on their companies, on their corporations, that they can maybe bail out one of their private or miners, or buy permanent trains for their main corporations or whatever. So they're looking to fund things better. Now, one of the things I looked at was, for example, this guy has 2 shares of the Grand Russian. He actually sat on enough money that he definitely could have had 3 shares of other companies. But I'm getting the feeling that this flows a little bit more like 35 in terms of stock, that you really want to hold stock. It doesn't look... So unlike 35, it looks like you can drop a corporation on someone without it hurting you terribly much. On the other hand, it doesn't look like it hurts the person terribly much to have a corporation dropped on them. This is not a game like 30, like 56, even like 70, where raping a corporation and handing it off to someone is a way to knock them out of the game. Nor is it necessarily a way to heavily bonus yourself, although it may be. But worst comes to worst, you got this sucker. You can drop anything into here, and you get most of your money back. You're not gonna, you're not forced to pay out of pocket for trains. Big difference. So holding 2 shares, even though priority, even though you're sitting to the right of the person owning the corporation, is not dangerous in this, I don't think. Certainly not as dangerous as it is in the other games. Priority ended up here. I don't know how much that's going to matter. We don't, there's nothing in the bank pool. There aren't a lot of there aren't a lot of corporations sitting around with just a certificate or 2 in them that are going to look really, really valuable, and only the first couple players get them. Although people might end up being deprived. There's only 4 certificates here. There's only 3 in this sucker. He managed to capitalize it very heavily. So priorities doesn't look like it means too much. Although, if nobody hooks things up, it may mean another corporation in one of these locations that nobody's reaching for. Corporations probably are worth something in this, just for that extra certificate, the 11 certificate limit. It's pretty standard, I think. I don't know if it's 11 or 13 in 30. But, you know, it's a small enough number that getting 2 shares, as long as it's producing, is pretty good. All right. Here we are, partway through that operating round, the first one of this turn. And I wanted to highlight something, the Moscow Kursk Railroad. Coming here out of Moscow, spent $20 to build that track, and another 40 plus 20, 60 more to build this track for the MVR, extending it. And that really highlights one of the many advantages to having multiple companies. Now, it doesn't mean the MVR can run right away, but here's the thing. In all XX games, if you hold 2 different companies, 2 different track laying entities, whatever, you're in a situation where sometimes one of them doesn't really have something great to do for itself, but it can help one of your other corporations, one of your other companies. In a lot of cases, there are some really obvious advantages, like being able to sell trains to another company. You know, that's the huge one. But being able to lay track for another company is also a big and interesting advantage. Being able to buy trains and force them out a little earlier so that your next company going can buy other trains that it wants. All these things, and they become more clear. So in something like 1830, I think you have 8 companies in that as well. And with 6 players, there's only 2 people maximum who are going to have 2 companies, 2 corporations. Whereas in the games with these miners, and this one has the most miners of any, but 1835 has like 6 of them, you have sort of a limited taste of this. And it actually ends up more on the track building than the train buying stage. So in 1830, you buy trains more when you have 2 companies, you have more influence with the trains. In this, because of the limits, you know, I can only have one train for my miner at this point. Because of that limit, buying trains is less of an advantage, but laying track is a huge one. Just something beyond the, I have an extra share, or whatever. There's other synergies that can be gained off of the companies. Now, anybody who's an XX player knows this, but I just thought I'd point it out to those who are, you know, new to the system, although I don't know why they'd be this far into my series. And as a quick follow-up, that, MVR was the next railroad to go, and they bought the train off the Moscow Kursk for $150. This is so that they don't have to go into debt in order to buy a 5 train, and the Moscow Kursk has enough cash to buy one now. We'll see what happens if a 6 comes out. Bad things happen, really bad things. Like this pile of money goes over into the Russian National. I'm counting that's not going to happen. Ding, ding, ding. A massive bell ringing round for the GRR. Yeah, that's an 1870 tournament, but whatever. Bought myself a token here in order to guarantee a route out to that big $80 spot out there. The GRR, and they're out of tokens now with the GRR. The GRR managed to run for $64 a share. That's a huge payout. And they ran that, running a 3 train, 1, 2, 3. I think routes are going to be huge in this because of the miners not having to count in some very valuable territories. But a 3 train there, a 1, 2, 3, 4 train out there, and a 1. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I'm miscounting something here. What did I have? 1, 2, 3. I think I'm $10 off. I think I actually made $10 more. But that may mean that there's a better route somewhere. I don't know. I'm not gonna look for it. I'm probably $10 short. But yeah, I ran the 3 train, the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5 ran up here, and it probably counted one of those small cities and shouldn't have. So it might be 65 a share. Nah, I see what it was. It's hard for me to see routes after I build them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's got no bonuses on the railroad. So that's the end of the first operating round. We're going into the merging round. The 6s did not quite fall. I don't think they could have. What happened? Both the MKNN and the MK bought an additional 5 train. Now the MK is sitting on a pile of cash here. They're certainly on the next run they'd be able to buy a 5 train, but there isn't one. They were kind of looking at, do you buy this? Because what's going to happen? La la la. I think they're going to be able to buy a 6 train. There aren't a lot of them. There's only 2. Getting up to the 8 train at $800, that probably isn't going to happen without more than just a swallow. Well, without a swallow. With 2 trains, and that was kind of the thing. The Donetsk was looking really tasty because then they'd have an equal setup to what the big Grand Russian has. And then the final 5 train, the 4th one, went to the Russian National Railway. And they're beginning to get to the point. As soon as that the 6 train comes out, though, somebody will probably upgrade Moscow, and then they get a token in Moscow, which will help them tremendously. They had trouble finding a route. Their little 4 route ran up here, which isn't bad at all. But now it's going to get ugly, because one thing we see is the MK closed that route out to Ekaterinburg. So now we're going to the merger round, and interesting. They bought the rail. They're going to get a chance to buy. We'll see what happens. I can guarantee you there will be some mergers. We'll see how it falls out. So we end the merge round, and we see just what a dicky kind of player I like to be. Donetsk turns into a corporation, not in very good shape, very weak actually. Down here, they were looking to try to make a merger deal with someone else. The problem is nobody was thinking things would go as ugly as they did. The guy who really would have liked to is disconnected from everyone. His railroad is going to fall into the nationalized railroad, almost guaranteed. And he's got a loan on it. Not a good situation. The Moscow Kursk set himself up to start a really cool, good company. Shifted a lot of money over there. But nobody left a corporation for him. Because a guy who was set up to make a merger, could have dumped a lot of shares in, may have been the better move for him. I'm not sure. Instead decided to start 2 corporations on 2 shares each, with a 3 train on each, largely for the sole purpose of dicking this guy over. And this guy, but he wasn't going to get a shot anyway. Well, actually he would have. He would have been the next one to get an option. The MK would have been the last one to get an option. The guy owning the MK should have cut a deal with the Donetsk because he would have gone with it, to make a railway, which would have been a merged one. They both could have thrown a lot of money into it and made it something real. Instead, what we have is a lot of conversions, none of which look really solid. So the only real hope for this guy to save this railroad, now he can buy a train and shift it over here. The problem is he's got this, he's got the Moscow token, he likes his railroad. But his only real hope to maintain that position is somebody gets busted. one of these 3 new ones, because all the current ones look pretty solid. Well, his other one looks a little iffy because it just threw all its money over to the Moscow, or some of its money over to Moscow Kursk. But he's got to hope that these were a bad idea, and such a bad idea that he gets another chance. I don't know if that's going to happen. One good thing for him, not only does he have the 6 trains, but he has the 7 trains. He's not going to be forced to go away until the 8 comes out. By then, they may be paying for those really risky maneuvers. But I like to play a really dicky game. I don't like to see somebody getting an advantage, and I'm often willing to take a hit if I think it's bringing down people who are in the lead. Now, I think this guy is in the lead right now, actually, but nothing much I can do about him. He's set up with that nice run out there, really in good shape. The only thing is he's got this kind of crappy token here. That's not very useful. Live and learn. So, as we enter into the operating round, it turns out there's no way to survive what was set up. So, Moscow Kursk had to buy a train. It could have bought it off the other corporation. That would have saved all this mess. Instead, they took out 2 loans, picked up the first 6 train, crashed. There go the 3 trains. All the 3 trains disappear. Start off, Ekaterinin automatically falls in and is now part of the Russian National. Okay, no big deal. But then, every single one of those corporations sitting on only a 3 train, the best one had like $200. With the 5 loans maximum that they could take, they'd be at $450. Worst comes, the best case scenario, I mean the only case scenario really, is that they fall back a share value and then fall into into the Russian National. So, who had options? Well, the guy over here running, I don't remember what, no. This guy was he had the first option on the MVRR. And actually his was one of the better ones, was he could take the 6 train. Maybe between them he could have gotten 2 running companies out of it. It looked stupid. It's like, why take a hose? Just the hell with it. And he dumped it in. It wasn't that good a railroad. It really wasn't. So now, that's part of it. Well, after seeing that, the guy with the Moscow and Kazan says, you know, my second railroad really sucked. It was one of these down here, the Donetsk, I think. It was a horrible idea. I didn't want it. I was just trying to save my stock value. I guess I could have just crashed it. It doesn't really make much difference either way, to tell you the truth. So they ended up just dumping theirs as well, which is kind of a neutral, it's kind of a wash. I mean, that's what would have happened had they left the corporation unmerged. The guy who got hurt was the guy who tried to dick things over. He probably had a viable corporation between the 2 companies. He did not have 2. So he ended up dumping both his in, and now there's an open spot over in Kiev that shouldn't be there. And the Moscow Kursk guy is going to be able, oh, I'm sorry, this is during the operating round, right? Because he actually had to buy his train. He's going to be able, on the next merge round, to form the corporation. Alright, that ends the second operating round. We go to the merger round. I think we're definitely going to see the Moscow Kursk forming a corporation here. Well, maybe it doesn't have to. If it doesn't, there are still 3 rail areas. But there are 4 corporations So they're guaranteed one no matter what. So they don't have to. I don't know if they're going to or not. The problem for them is if enough trains come out in the first operating round on 3 corporations and what's left, I think they're going to form one. In this operating round, we saw the MKR ring in at 61 and buy a token up here. It couldn't buy a train only because it's full up. Had enough cash, full up. All right, onward we go. So here we're at another rules question. I forgot to run the RSR, so I did so. Building piles and piles of money, like 660 bucks or something. It's got enough money to buy trains. It's only got 2 trains in its spot. I look over at the clarifications, the FAQ, whatever, and somebody actually asked this question on there, and they answered it, sort of, but they unfortunately asked it in the midst of another question, and it wasn't actually answered, which is, can I buy more trains? Am I stuck by the train limit? And I think it's allowed to keep buying trains because of what it's designed to do is just push the trains out. It wouldn't make a lot of sense if it's stuck with 2 trains. It couldn't do that anymore. So I'm going to say it's going to just keep buying trains until the 8 train comes out. Now, we're seeing the pile of money going down, and this is not entirely a non-factor. It just pulled in 660 bucks out of there. It's as big as any of the other companies, and it's going to get bigger. This is why the, oh gee, it just stops running operating rounds at the end, and once the 8 train comes out, is kind of a funky rule. I think this thing would definitely drive the bank into bankruptcy if that rule weren't in place. But we're going to play with that rule as it stands, but I am going to allow it to keep buying trains, and then it may crash the bank if it has enough trains. Yeah. It's not in the yellow yet. It can't create a new corporation. And yes, the National formed another rail. And I think we will see 3 new corporations likely come up, which is enough to bring out the 8 train. Am I positive? No. But there's a lot of money out there. And this guy is the only one who really doesn't want that train coming out. There are people who have limited trains, but they can live with it. People who have bonus trains, but probably have enough money that if they swallow, they can afford a train. So, yeah, he just got hosed because he's 1 space short of the yellow line. All right, I'm going to wrap this one up, and then I'll move to the stock round, but I'll be sending this up to you guys. One thing I wanted to say, I'm getting feedback from a couple of people who are more experienced with this, and it's actually really great. I know you can't really, some of it's advice, and it's not going to impact my play, but there are, if anybody's watching this who's not an experienced 61 player, that's a lot better than looking at what I'm doing. Don't assume what I'm doing in any sense is a reasonable game of this. This is a completely new player to this game, exploring the system and exploring what's happening. And that's why, like, you know, you hear, I'm dreading what's going to happen when this happens. Yeah, I've had a couple of shockers like this. I didn't think this guy was stuck with his train. I thought he was set up and going good, and that's why he ditched his company. Now he's looking really, really questionable, and it looks like he's going to lose this, and he may be starting a corporation in order to try to get that 6th train back and have 2 permanent trains, and to time things so that he has a shot at getting the token there. Anyway, I'm almost out of time here, and I just want to thank the people who've been giving rules clarifications in some cases. Mostly I think I'm doing okay with that, but the strategy advice, it helps me to look at it afterwards and say, that's what's different. And I'm also thinking, I'm kind of wondering why anybody would watch this who hadn't played 61 before, because I think it's amusing to see someone screw up as badly as I must be doing. But it is giving a flavor of a very, very different XX game. So if you're really an XX addict, I guess I could see why you'd want to look at this one. It's real different for me, at least.